Hey folks, welcome back. Good news! My parents have kicked me out of their house. Now again, you might be thinking, oh boy, things aren't looking good for old Ben. But don't worry, I've come back to my old apartment to find that no one has rented it out. So I figure I've only got like 10 years until squatters' rights kick in. So don't be a narc. Super Mario, Nintendo's mascot, their biggest franchise, their #1 guy. And also there's Kirby. He's cool too. Kirby's weird, right? There's like a million Kirby games and Nintendo touts him like he's their mascot when it's convenient for them. And then another Mario comes out and they throw Kirby to the side. He's like the middle child of Nintendo IPs. Well, no, actually, I guess there are a lot of middle children who fit better than Kirby. But fucking look at Kirby, man. I love him. How do you not love Kirby? He's a circle. He's just a circle. And yet he's one of the most brilliant character designs of all time. He debuted in Kirby's Dream Land, a 1992 Game Boy game developed by HAL Laboratories' Masahiro Sakurai and published by Nintendo. I guess in a lot of ways, Kirby is HAL's mascot. Even to this day, they handle the development of every Kirby game. Masahiro Sakurai is, of course, best known as the mastermind behind the Super Smash Bros. Series. But Kirby has always been his pride and joy. Funny thing about Kirby, he was initially a placeholder character for the developers to use until they came up with a new character. But they grew to like Kirby so much that they decided to just leave him in there. I mean, can you blame them? Look at this! Look at that! But in any case, he went on to become one of the most popular, profitable video game characters of all time, spawning like a million games. Like, for real, look at this. There are so many Kirby games, man. Absolute classics like Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland, Kirby 64, Kirby's Epic Yarn, Kirby Air Ride. I fucking love Kirby Air Ride, man. And then there's the weird shit like Kirby Mass Attack or Kirby Tilt and Tumble. This game ruined my life as a kid. But all that aside, there's one game that a lot of people consider to be the definitive Kirby game, and that is Kirby Superstar for the Super Nintendo. And I mean, it makes sense. At the time, it was Kirby's big foray into the next generation. It was like Link's Awakening, Super Metroid, Final Fantasy IV. It was Kirby, now in HD. And by HD, I mean the graphics were a little better, because it was 1996. A lot of mainstays from the Kirby franchise originated in this game. Dynablade and Meta Knight both made their debuts. A lot of iconic Kirby music like Gourmet Race made its first appearance. Hell, it was actually the first game where Kirby gets a little hat to indicate what copy ability he has. In a lot of ways, this was the Kirby game. But whatever, Kirby Superstar, Super Nintendo, big deal. That's not the point here, folks. In 2008, to commemorate Kirby's 15th anniversary, Kirby Superstar Ultra was released on the Nintendo DS, a fully fledged, updated remake of Kirby Superstar. So some of you might be thinking, Ben, if this game is a remake, why isn't this video a did they wang it? Because it's fucking Kirby, who cares? So here we are, Kirby Superstar Ultra for the good old Nintendo double screen. We hop in and we can only play one game, Spring Breeze, so let's fucking do it. It's your standard 2D platforming Kirby game. If you press jump in midair, Kirby sucks in some air and he can fly repeatedly by pressing jump. You double tap to run and you can do a little baseball slide attack by pressing down and jump. Obviously the most famous thing about Kirby is the fact that he can inhale enemies and consume them to gain their abilities. In terms of abilities, this game is actually super comprehensive. When you copy a Waddle Dee and get the laser ability, you don't just get the laser sword. You can charge it to do a super blast. If you're running, you can do this big wide attack. If you're in the air, you can do this diagonal laser attack thing, and so on. Every single ability in this game has a bunch of different moves you can pull off. And if you hit start, you can swipe along and see all the different attacks. There's combo attacks, running attacks, different moves when you're right up close to an enemy. It's nuts. It's like a fighting game. It's so in-depth. And of course, one of the coolest things about this game is the fact that when you have an ability, you can press Y and you'll materialize a homie to assist you. If you're playing multiplayer, the second player will control your friend. But in single player, it's an AI. And say what you will about artificial intelligence, but this AI tries its best. To be fair, it doesn't impede you and it helps you fight enemies, so there's not really a reason to not have a little friend with you. But like with bosses, you're guaranteed to have your buddy die because they just fucking sacrifice themselves for the greater good. Like, buddy, this is Kirby we're talking about, not Vietnam. You don't have to lay your life down to ensure victory. This is a pretty easy game. Look, I know making video games is hard, but like, would it really have been that difficult to program your homie's artificial intelligence so that he doesn't just straight up walk directly into every single obstacle? So Kirby Superstar is essentially a compilation game of a bunch of small Kirby adventures. This kind of surprised me as a kid. I was kind of expecting a fully fledged new Kirby adventure. I mean, the only game I had really played before that was Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. But it is pretty cool that it's basically a bunch of little games packed into one game. So let's go through every single game on Kirby Superstar Ultra and break them down, because this video is not getting longer on its own. Also, just for fun, I'm going to rank every game on my brand new DDD scale. Of course, going from 1 to 3 Ds. The first game we're given is Spring Breeze, and there's not a whole lot to say about it. It's a remake of Kirby's Dream Land, the first game in the series. It's your basic Kirby game. You go through a bunch of levels, copying abilities, and then you fight DDD at the end, and all is well in Dreamland. This is why I love Kirby so much. The plot is always the same, and it's the most tame possible conflict you could imagine. That rat bastard King DDD has stolen all the cakes and donuts and whatnot from Dreamland, and it's up to Kirby to get them back. And then usually it's no hard feelings. Kirby can only stay mad at King DDD for so long. This one is pretty basic, but it's a good introduction to the game. I'd give it 1.5 Ds. Anyway, the next game is Gourmet Race, and this is the most mini game of all the games on here. It's just a straight race against King DDD to a finish line, and you want to pick up as much food as possible on the way. And holy shit, man, I know this is Kirby, but you would straight up have to not be paying attention to lose at this game. King DDD simply cannot keep up with you, plus he's twice the size of Kirby, so he can't fit in as many little nooks. It's whatever, you get the entire experience playing at once. I'm not really dying to go back to it. I would give it 1 D out of 3. Next up is Dynablade. Dynablade. This was, of course, the debut of the eponymous Dynablade, a giant bird who would become a recurring character in the Kirby series. It's a fun little 2D side-scrolling adventure, a little bit more comprehensive than Spring Breeze. After fucking killing Dynablade for daring to occupy space in his domain, Kirby finds that he has orphaned all of her babies. Kirby knows what he has to do. No, but actually there's this cute little cutscene of Kirby teaching the babies how to fly, and then it shows that Dynablade is still alive. All is well in Kirby Land. This is fun. It's a solid little adventure and kind of like a longer Spring Breeze. Plus it introduced Dynablade, so I'll give it 2 out of 3 Ds. Next up is the Great Cave Offensive. Hell yeah. This is probably my favorite game of them all. It's like a big Metroidvania style game, where you go through this big interconnected map and collect treasures that are distributed around in chests throughout the different areas, fighting bosses and solving puzzles on the way. There's actually some level of challenge here. I mean, it's Kirby, so I use that word lightly. But like, some of the puzzles require some thinking, and the bosses actually have comprehensive movesets that can do a lot of damage. You can also go into the pause menu and look at all the treasure you've collected. And some of them are references to other Nintendo games. There's Captain Falcon's helmet, a Triforce, a DK barrel, Mr. Saturn, etc. It's neato. But yeah, overall the Great Cave Offensive is awesome. A full DDD for this one, fellas. The next is Revenge of Meta Knight, and this one is pretty whatever, to be honest. It's just another standard 2D platforming game. But it has the added appeal of constantly stopping you to watch dialogue of Meta Knight's cronies talk about Kirby invading the ship, which is sick. Everybody plays Kirby games for the plot. You end in a sword fight with Meta Knight and then have this little Sonic CD, Metal Sonic style chase sequence, and then the halberd sinks into the fucking ocean. Jesus Christ, Kirby, why, man? There's not much to say about this one. It's just Kirby with unskippable dialogue. I don't know why this exists. 0.5 out of 3. Fuck you. Next up is Milky Way Wishes, which is actually kind of a neat idea, honestly. Kirby has lost his ability to copy powers from enemies, which means that you start out as just plain old Kirby. However, you can get copy abilities, but you have to find them hidden throughout each level. It's kind of a cool idea. I mean, the concept of a Kirby game without immediate access to copy abilities is sort of neat. Although once you're late in the game, you're pretty overpowered. You can just switch abilities at will. To be fair though, you really have to search each level for the abilities. They don't just hand them to you. So it's not like the game just blatantly gives you the option to have whatever copy ability you want. Plus it has some neat side-scrolling shoot-'em-up levels, a style of game that is pretty hard to not make fun. And then you cap it off with a fight against Karl Marx. No wealth distribution here, says Kirby. Milky Way Wishes is alright, I'll give it 1.5 Ds. Next up is the first game that is wholly new to Superstar Ultra and wasn't in the Super Nintendo game, Revenge of the King. This one's neat. It's basically like Spring Breeze hard mode. It takes place in like a visually warped version of Spring Breeze. All the enemies are distorted from their normal counterparts. It's actually not unlike the other world from Silent Hill. I would kill a man in cold blood for a Silent Hill game starring Kirby. It's cool though, the bosses are a little harder, the last level has a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up segment, and at the end you fight DDD in a wrestling ring, just like in Spring Breeze. But this time it's an electrical cage match and you're fighting against Punish DDD. I like this one, it spices up Spring Breeze a little and even adds a few extra boss fights and makes some of the levels a little longer. I'd say it's deserving of 2 Ds out of 3. It's about that time, baby. Meta Nightmare Ultra time. This one is weird. You play through Spring Breeze, Dynablade, Great Cave Offensive, Revenge of Meta Knight, and Milky Way Wishes. But this time you play as Meta Knight. He's basically just Kirby with the sword ability, except his wings deal damage and he's massively overpowered. Like, for real, you thought Kirby was too easy? Kirby is fucking Dark Souls in comparison to this. As you defeat enemies, you get these little energy ball things, which you can spend to perform one of 4 different abilities. Meta Quick, which makes you fast, if you want that. This ability is useless. You're still vulnerable to attacks, and it's not like you move slow to begin with. Night Call, which gives you a homie to fight with, I guess they had to make it multiplayer somehow. One thing that's kind of neat is that it can either spawn this green guy or this purple guy. Heal, which costs a measly 10 points and fully refills your health, and Mock Tornado. I'm not sure what about this is Mock. Pretty sure I was playing Kirby, not NASCAR, but whatever. This kills everything on screen and actually one-shots a lot of the bosses as well, which is pretty wild. You really realize hard that these levels were designed with Kirby in mind. It's a fucking cakewalk with Meta Knight, especially the Great Cave Offensive. Since you don't have the objective of looking for treasure, there's no need to explore the levels, you can just walk straight to the exit. At the end, after the entire game being a joke, you fight probably the hardest boss in the game, Galacta Knight, who would go on to appear in future Kirby games. Overall, this is fun, but it's way too easy. It probably would have been better to just make a whole new minigame starring Meta Knight, rather than playing as him through these levels that are clearly not designed for him. That said, it's pretty fun and a cool idea. I'm honestly surprised that Meta Knight has never gotten his own full-on spin-off game. It's another 1.5 Ds, fellas. Next up is the Arena, a boss rush mode. It's exactly what you think it is. You hop in and try to beat all the bosses in the game. This is another point where you can see the influence that Super Smash Bros. Took from this game. It's set up very similarly to the All-Star mode introduced in Melee. You start in a room with a bunch of abilities, and then after you beat each boss, it transports you to a room with a bunch of Maxim tomatoes and 2 random abilities. And once you use the Maxim tomatoes, they turn into a standard tomato, and then after that, they're gone. This means that you get a total of 5 Maxim tomatoes to beat every boss, so you have to use them sparingly. As a result, I mean, there's a little bit of a challenge to it, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's still, you know, Kirby, but I find myself using the shield a lot here to avoid taking damage. I mean, this is pretty fun. It's a boss rush, so, you know, you get exactly what was advertised to you. I'd give it 1.5 out of 3 Ds. If you beat at least 13 bosses in the arena, you unlock the next game mode, Helper to Hero. Another boss rush. The difference between Helper and Hero in the arena is that in this one, you play as one of the NPC homies that you can normally summon as Kirby. This is alright. I mean, it's basically just like if you played the arena and insisted on not changing abilities or summoning a friend to help you. You would think that would make it harder, but not really, honestly. I could be wrong, but it seems like the helpers do a lot more damage than Kirby, especially the hammer guy. His name is Bonkers, thank you very much. Yeah, I don't know about this one. It's kind of just like a lazy inclusion. The helpers control exactly like Kirby, so I don't really get the point of this. 1 out of 3. And with the completion of Helper to Hero, you unlock the final game mode, the True Arena. Another boss rush. I love the usage of the word true here. I guess gatekeeping exists even in Dreamland. Alright, to be fair, this is different from the other boss rushes because it's much more difficult. You go through and fight harder bosses who deal more damage, and you're not even given Maxim tomatoes. All you're afforded is 5 regular tomatoes that only heal a little bit of your health bar. This is by far the toughest of the games on here. I'd say it's worthy of 2 out of 3 Ds. So with all the games complete, here are my official rankings on the DDD scale. That's all the main offerings in Kirby Superstar Ultra. But before we wrap this up, let's look at one more thing in the game, the mini-games, or sub-games as they're called. There are a total of 5 broken into 2 categories. 3 of them are totally new to Superstar Ultra and are entirely touchscreen based. Kirby Card Swipe, a matching game where you try to be the fastest to pick a card that matches the one on the top screen. It's pretty fun. Kirby on the Draw, a fast-paced shooter game where you have to knock down standees and get points while avoiding, bombers, I guess. And finally, Snack Tracks, a game where Kirby commits multiple of the 7 deadly sins, namely gluttony, wrath, and pride. And then you also have nostalgic sub-games. Megaton Punch, where you try to do as much damage to whatever planet this is as possible, and Samurai Kirby, a reaction-based game where you try to be the first to hit A. These are taken directly from the Super Nintendo game, only now they're unlockable and no longer multiplayer. Yeah! Why, though? So that's Kirby Superstar Ultra, a game that I absolutely loved as a kid. And as a teenager. And an adult. So what do I think of it now? Well, I hate to say it, but I am about to express my nuanced opinion of a Kirby video game to you. Kirby Superstar Ultra is a solid game, and a good remake at that. It added new minigames and 4 new game modes. And they didn't really have to do that, they could have just remade the original 7 and called it a day. However, the new offerings were kinda lame, honestly. Sure, they're super fun, but they're kinda the bare minimum when you think about it. Like, I mean, Revenge of the King is basically just a color-swapped hard mode for Spring Breeze. Meta Nightmare Ultra is just playing all the main games as Meta Knight, who controls like Sword Kirby, and the other 2 are just boss rushes. The new minigames are fun, to the game's credit, but the 2 old minigames are literally taken directly from the Super Nintendo game. Visuals and all. And also, they're no longer multiplayer. Like, why? You guys couldn't have even been to redo these games with new sprites? Come on, man. Samurai Kirby was in Nightmare to Dreamland on the Game Boy Advance and it looked completely different. I don't know, this just feels kind of lazy to me. So there you have it. This game sucks. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, I still really like this game. I mean, it's Kirby. You can't really go wrong. It may not be a perfect remake, but it's still really good. There's a lot of fun to be had. But hey, whenever I think about something disappointing, I just think to myself, could be worse. Could be Kirby Tilt and Tumble. That game fucking sucks.